Mr. Speaker, thank you very much indeed. One of the things that we're seeking to do as we leave the European Union is to make sure we don't have a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now, the way I think we should solve that, and I think this is the government's position, is to have a free trade agreement. The problem I have is the backstop in the withdrawal agreement. The Prime Minister was clear that a backstop that treated Northern Ireland differently and put a border in the Irish Sea was unacceptable and not something any British Prime Minister could sign off. And I'm afraid to say she has done exactly that. And, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't 100% convinced of that based on my own analysis of the withdrawal agreement. I am just a humble accountant, Mr. Speaker, not an expert lawyer. But this morning, having read the legal advice, the letter from the Attorney-General to the Prime Minister about the legal effect of the protocol, in paragraph 7, it is plain and clear. Northern Ireland remains in the European Union's customs union. It will apply the whole of the European Union's customs acquis, and the Commission and the European Court of Justice will continue to have jurisdiction over it. And goods passing from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will be subject to a declaration process. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is if a company in my constituency wins an order with a business in Northern Ireland, in our own country, it will have to have that deal signed off by a British bureaucrat. And if our rules in Great Britain have deviated from Northern Ireland, it may be told that it can't ship that order to a part of our own country. Now, I don't find that acceptable, Mr. Speaker. I think the Prime Minister was right when she said no UK Prime Minister should sign off such a deal. I still stick to that, which is why I won't be able to support the withdrawal agreement as it's currently set out. That's the first time, Mr. Speaker, in my 13 years in this House I will not be able to support my party, and I regret that. And I regret being put in a position where, in order to hold to the promises that we made in our general election manifesto last year to the people of our country, I'm forced to vote against a proposition put before this House by my Prime Minister. But I think it's important in politics that we keep our promises, because that is how we maintain the trust of the British people. And I think breaking our promises is not something we should do. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the backstop is also of concern for those who perhaps may not be concerned about Northern Ireland because of the indefinite nature of it. And the attorney set out earlier this week the indefinite nature of that customs union if the backstop is triggered. And I fear, Mr. Speaker, that will critically weaken our negotiating position as we negotiate the future trade relationship, which I agree with my right honourable friend, the member for Preseli Pembrokeshire, is the thing that is really important. But if we cripple our negotiating position, we will end up with a very bad future relationship which will stick with us not just for years but potentially for decades. And I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, again in the legal advice that we have now seen published this morning, it is clear. The attorney makes it clear that despite statements in the protocol that it is not intended to be permanent, and the clear intention of the parties that it should be replaced by alternative permanent arrangements, in international law, the protocol would endure indefinitely until a superseding agreement took place. He also makes it clear that there is no mechanism that will enable us to leave the UK-wide customs union without a subsequent agreement. Mr. Speaker, that remains the case even if the parties are still negotiating many years later, or even if the parties believe that talks have broken down and there is no prospect of a future relationship agreement. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Sir Robert Sims. In this country, somebody had a contract of employment where only one of the parties could end the agreement, or if you had a business contract where only one party could end the agreement, it would be indenture and would be struck down by British courts. Yet we're contemplating an international treaty where that is the case.
Well, I completely agree with my honourable friend. That's not a contract I would be willing to sign, and I'm afraid that's why I can't sign up to this withdrawal agreement. It's also the case that the withdrawal agreement will hand over around £39 billion in an unconditional way. And I think most people who carry out negotiations generally don't hand over all the money until they've got a deal. And I think we should make the money conditional on both getting a good deal, but also getting a good deal on a timely basis. And I think if we were to do that, we would get a good deal on a timely basis. So I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister may put before the House, there may be amendments to the motions, there may be extra words added to the political declaration, but the thing we're being asked to vote on is a legally binding treaty, the withdrawal agreement. Unless that is changed, then words added to the political declaration and any extra words on the motions before this House are legally meaningless, and I don't think are capable of persuading colleagues that are concerned about the withdrawal agreement that they have significantly changed the position. Of course.
To my right honourable friend giving way, he's making a very clear and compelling speech. But given that it's been pretty clear for 12 months now that the withdrawal agreement would include a Northern Irish backstop, and that that backstop would have some teeth to it, and that there was no way that the EU or the Irish government were going to agree to a backstop with an end date, because then it wouldn't be a backstop. So how does my right honourable friend propose that we overcome that problem, and what does voting down the deal next Tuesday do to make a solution to the problem that he's saying any more likely?
Well, I think, first of all, in the joint report that was signed, there were two aspects of the joint report. One of them we have delivered in the withdrawal agreement, but the other one was about making sure there were the unfettered access to the Union, the United Kingdom market, remained in place. That may well be true for Northern Ireland businesses, but it is not true for businesses in Great Britain. So we have not delivered, according to the Attorney's advice, we have not delivered on that joint report in this withdrawal agreement. And given that the Irish government and the British government and the EU have all said they don't want to see a hard border or infrastructure, and we're all committed to that, and we're all supposed to be committed to reaching a deal on a future relationship, then I don't see any need to have the backstop in this deal. And it is clear to me that if the backstop remains in the deal, the Prime Minister will not be able to get it through the House. And if she is defeated, if the Cabinet is defeated, this is the Cabinet's agreement, not just the Prime Minister's. If the Cabinet's deal is defeated next week, I think she should go to the European Council at the end of next week and say that any deal with the backstop is not going to pass this House, and they should think again. And I think they will reflect on the fact that if the fifth largest economy in the world and a close defence and security partner is leaving the European Union, they have a choice. Do we leave with a good, positive relationship on which we can build in the months and years to come, or do we leave with a spirit of rancour and discord? And that will be something that our European partners will have to reflect on. I hope, if they reflect on that, they will reach a wise and sensible decision, and we can reach a sensible agreement. The final thing I would say, which is, I think, more aimed at my Conservative colleagues, because of the importance of Northern Ireland, I think my colleagues need to reflect on the fact that if this deal were voted through next week, it is my belief, having listened carefully to what they've said, that the relationship between our Democratic Unionist Party allies and the Prime Minister would be fractured beyond repair. And what we saw yesterday, where we were defeated 3 times in this House, will be a state of affairs repeated on a number of occasions, day after day after day. And I think we would be in office, but unable to govern our country effectively. And I think colleagues need to think about that. It is not too late for the Prime Minister to think again, to come before this House, before the vote on Tuesday, and say that she's going to change the withdrawal agreement and deliver that message to our European partners. If she does that, if the withdrawal agreement is changed, I, for one, will happily support the government, and I believe the majority of MPs in this House will do so, and it will unify our party and bring our DUP allies back with us. If she does that, she'll have my support. I regret if she doesn't. For the first time in my 13 years in Parliament, I will be unable to support the leader of my party and the Prime Minister of my country.